All right, so good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you are. Welcome to another fantastic episode. Today we have Matthew Harris from Matthew Harris Law, and of course, your host, Francesca Cadit. That's myself. A quick little bio before we get right into things. So, Mr. Harris served 8 years in the United States Air Force in a special operations occupation as a Tactical Air Control Party or TACP member. He is a decorated Iraq War veteran who knows what it means to fight for something he believes in. Since beginning his law career as a reserve police officer in 2004, Mr. Harris has gained immeasurable experience in divorce, child support, child custody, adoptions, and general civil litigation. Mr. Harris is passionate about his clients' rights and will be a zealous advocate. As a respected member of the legal community, you can trust him to keep your best interests at heart and treat you with the utmost professionalism. Welcome, Matthew.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Just to put things into perspective, I work with students and a lot of them are interested in pursuing what I would call the big three, maybe even the big four these days, but definitely medicine, law, engineering, and then nowadays, of course, tech. Out of curiosity, and for students who are considering that path, what led you to pursue law?
Well, whenever I joined the military, everyone swore to uphold and defend the Constitution. And so for me, I realized after joining that I didn't know as much about the Constitution as I wanted to know. Throughout my time in the military, I spent a lot of time with the UCMJ, that's the Uniform Code of Military Justice. It gave me a lot of exposure to the laws that affect us on a daily basis. And I really wanted to be able to pursue that passion, to be able to understand those better so that way I could help represent clients and make a difference in the world.
Thinking back to those students, if a student were interested in becoming a lawyer, what advice might you give about, let's say, what undergraduate or pre-law major to choose?
Well, I can tell you that for my law school class, it was a varied list of undergraduate degrees, because in order for you to get into law school, you have to have a bachelor's degree. And so I knew people who had political science majors, and I also knew people who had classical guitar majors. So there's really no set career path if you want to ultimately go into law as to which bachelor's degree it is that you want to pursue. What I recommend to people is to pick a bachelor's that you can fall back on, that can get you a good job if you decide ultimately not to go to law school. If you are deciding to go into musical law or you want to do entertainment law, then perhaps that classical guitar bachelor's degree might be of some benefit to you versus a political science degree. I don't know a lot of people that go out into the workforce with a strong political science degree, not knowing where they're going and what they're going to use it for.
I do know a couple of students who are pursuing poli-sci or political science. I mean, are there other pathways from poli-sci that you're aware of?
I honestly have no clue. I don't know what, I mean, that's a short answer. I really don't know what most people do with a political science degree other than go into public service, I guess, at that point. But for people that are considering law, a lot of them get the recommendation that they should do political science because that's going to help make their resume better for getting into a good law school, when really it's just they've got to determine what it is that they want to ultimately do with that law degree rather than just focusing on getting into law and being a lawyer.
On that note, what do you think makes for a good lawyer? I'm sure there's no cookie cutter answer. Are there certain qualities that you think would make for a better lawyer compared to others?
Whenever I was in the military, one of the things that made my job so difficult is that it was very physically demanding. And so the people who ultimately made it weren't always the strongest physically, they were the strongest mentally. And so it was those people who would not give up even in the face of adversity. Whenever they were physically tired, they would just focus on the task at hand, focus on doing what needed to be done, and they were the ones who ultimately pushed through, mainly because they were too stubborn to quit. The characteristics that I think makes a good lawyer is someone who doesn't give up at the first sign of it being difficult, someone who's willing to persevere, who's willing to put in those long hours for clients if necessary. They have a servant's heart. They're someone who wants to do good for someone else rather than to do good for themselves. Those people who are willing to put others ahead of themselves are going to be the ones who are going to make the best attorneys. The LSAT is the step between your undergraduate degree and law school. And then the bar exam is the step between graduating from law school and being able to practice law.
What advice would you give to anyone who's maybe studying for the LSAT or for students who are interested in pursuing the LSAT to become a lawyer one day?
Well, for people who are considering going to law one day or that they might go into law school, I always recommend that they download a practice LSAT and take it cold with no prep whatsoever. And I know that sounds insane, but it's not one of those tests that you can really study for, because it doesn't test things that you have read or learned over time. It tests your ability to comprehend passages that are given to you and to demonstrate your use of logic in order to solve problems. They have something called logic games. The worst game in the world as far as I'm concerned, but they call it the logic games. It tests your ability to problem solve in real time by giving you this convoluted, Joe is standing in front of Jack in line at a movie, and Jill stands behind Joe if it's a Tuesday. And so then it gives you all these different sets of parameters and says, all right, so who is third in line on Wednesday? The reason that I recommend people to just take that test cold, and what I mean by taking the test is download a free sample off the internet, take it under test conditions, just in a quiet room at your house, because it's testing items that you're not going to be able to study for. You're going to have a pretty good idea testing cold how close you are on the scale for the types of schools that you want to attend. If you know that I will only go to law school if I can get into Harvard, well, they've got a really high bar for what their LSAT requirements are. But if you know that the local law school where I live, where my family's established, this is the law school that I want to go to. For example, me, I'm here in Lubbock, Texas, where Texas Tech University is. If I know that that's the school that I want to go to, and I know what their LSAT admissions requirements are, then I know by taking that test cold if I'm going to be pretty close in the neighborhood. Because with some prep, some study, some learning of some of the tricks that can narrow your field whenever you're taking that multiple choice test, it can improve your score by about 10, maybe 15 points. So that's my recommendation for students is take that test cold. Imagine adding 10 to 15 points, and if adding 10 to 15 points to your cold test score doesn't put you in the ballpark of one of those schools that you must attend, then it might not be worth pursuing at that point. And I hate pulling the plug on it so early, but that's just the way it shakes out.
I don't know how much the rules have changed. So by chance, do you happen to know, is there a maximum kind of limit regarding how many times you can take the LSAT, or are there any restrictions or limitations?
No, I don't believe that there are any limitations on how many times you can take the test, but the law schools are going to see how many times you have submitted to that test. That's just a factor for them to consider during that admissions process. Is if it took you 20 tries to get up, and I've never known anyone to take a test that many times, but if it took someone 20 tries to get up to just their very bare minimum, then that might not be a very strong applicant for them to consider.
Okay, so they can see the number of times you've submitted or taken the test in that case.
Yes.
Something to consider. Okay. And you did mention there's the difference between the LSAT and the bar, of course, the bar being the one between law school and practicing as a lawyer. How does the bar differ from the LSAT then?
Night and day. So what's similar is kind of that same logic games requirement that you find on the LSAT. You find in law school and you find during the bar exam. During the bar exam, what they're testing for is your ability to spot issues and being able to apply the law. So at this point, you really do have to know the law in order to pass the bar exam, obviously. And so it's not just testing your ability to think like the LSAT does. And the bar exam tests your ability to take the law that you've learned and being able to apply it to a new situation, so to a fact pattern that they give to you. The logic games portion of the LSAT has some bearing later on, is because that ability to make those logical inferences from the law to the fact pattern is what makes the difference in your ability to pass the bar exam.
So is there such thing as a best law school? I mean, we mentioned Harvard Law earlier. I think everyone sort of is familiar with that, or Princeton Law, what have you.
There's a best law school for what you plan to do with it, is my answer. Texas Tech, I consider that the best law school. because of I knew what they had to offer and what I intended to do with my law degree whenever I graduated. Texas Tech, for example, was very strongly associated with military. It had a lot of veterans programs. It had a veterans military association. That was something that I valued a lot for my law school, or for Texas Tech. It has a really great litigation section. And so I knew that for my law degree, I wanted to be able to take it out to actually practice law. I always categorize people who want to go to law school into two different buckets, two different categories. They either want to be a lawyer or they want to practice law. The ones who want to be a lawyer are the ones that you hear at parties, at social gatherings. They tell everybody at the party, I'm a lawyer, this is what I'm a lawyer. Then you have people who want to practice law. They're not the ones that want everybody at the party to know that they're the lawyer. They're not in it in order to increase their own status. They're in it in order to help people. And so they want to get into the trenches. They want to help a client take a case from cradle to grave and really make a difference in the world. I always ask people to consider, what do you want to do with your law degree? Do you want to be a lawyer or do you want to practice law? And I wanted to practice law. So I chose a law school that had really great practical aspects that would teach how to be able to go out and take cases from the beginning to the end.
The be a lawyer is more the prestige, status, that sort of aspect. And then practicing law is more, like you said, it's a servant's heart. It's wanting to serve people, wanting to make a difference in people's lives, things like that.
Yep.
I've watched shows, admittedly, and these are where my questions come from. And this is where I wouldn't say most, but some of my legal knowledge comes from. So there's How to Get Away with Murder, there's Legally Blonde, Suits, things like that. What is the difference between the lawyers who are in the courts versus, let's say, lawyers who are more contract-based or paperwork-based? Are they the same? I mean, do you do a little bit of both, or are those different specialties altogether?
Once you graduate from law school, you take the bar exam, you don't have to make a decision of whether you want to be a transactional attorney, which is mainly all the contracts and paperwork, or a litigator. In fact, in my practice, I'm usually a little bit of both, because I do a lot of civil litigation, I do a lot of family law. The drafting and everything that comes along with it requires a lot of transactional type work, while also having to go into court to argue those motions on a pretty regular basis. So it makes me a little bit transactional and a little bit litigation minded.
How I got to know you was through your YouTube channel. And if you wouldn't mind telling our audience a little bit about your YouTube channel, what kind of information you share, and a little bit more about your practice, that'd be great.
We're a small law firm in West Texas. We've been open just a little bit over 11 and a half years now. And so we started the YouTube channel kind of as a way to just give our own clients information that we were going to have to give them anyway, like how to preserve text messages and how to send text messages to us in order for us to be able to use those in court, how evidence is going to be presented at trial, and just general information that we had to give every client, that I felt bad that I'm charging every single client 30 minutes to explain all this stuff to them, whenever we could put this onto a video and then just say, here, go and watch this, because this is going to reduce your legal fees. The channel has kind of grown over the years from just information for our clients to creating content that just the general public is going to find beneficial. That's kind of where we are now, is we comment on ongoing cases, appear on other channels to provide a little bit of legal context. And we provide information about upcoming laws that are in place, whether it's jury-related, CPS, family, business, estate management, and probate. Pretty much the full gambit. We make sure that we do our best to educate the public.
So I must know, is law school anything like Legally Blonde?
It's exactly the same.
I knew it! Okay.
No different whatsoever. That was day in the life, absolutely.
Exactly like that. Okay, good to know. But I'm guessing not actually, though.
No.
Okay. When you transitioned from law school to practicing law, was there anything unexpected about being a lawyer?
The moment you realize how little you know is the real moment where you finally have to buckle down and start doing a lot more studying than you had even done in law school. Because law school, the goal is to teach you an inch deep and a mile wide. Whenever you go to trial, you're expected to know an inch wide and a mile deep.
So it's more studying than law school.
Oh, so much more. It's like being paid to do someone else's homework.
Any just advice in general for our prospective lawyers, for our future lawyers, for anyone pursuing law or interested in law in general?
Don't let anyone tell you to stop or that you can't make it. Buckle down, work as hard as you can once you get into law school. And on the other side of it, it's going to be worth it. It's an incredibly fulfilling career. I go home at night every single day knowing that I made a difference in somebody's life, and it's just incredibly rewarding.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. For our audience, thank you for watching. Thank you for tuning in. If you're interested in more study tips, habits, all that great stuff to achieve your dreams, feel free to check out my channel. And if you're interested in learning a little bit more about law, legal matters, and all of that great stuff, where can they find you, Matthew?
YouTube at Matthew Harris Law, PLLC.
Excellent. Until next time.
Thank you.